Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Should You Play, where I give you some spoiler-free gameplay and give you my thoughts after playing new games for a few hours, while also highlighting and checking out at least one of the PlayStation Plus games for each month. In this video I'm playing one of the February 2025 PlayStation Plus games, PAC-MAN World Re-PAC, the 2022 remake of the 1999 platforming game. While I never played the original game myself, Pac-Man was a staple game at the arcade I went to as a kid. It wasn't my favorite game there, but Pac-Man is an iconic symbol in gaming culture and history, and I knew that the platforming game was divisive at the time since some people loved the new approach, while others thought it strayed too far from the classic maze-chasing gameplay that most people grew up with. With that in mind, I think the game is a lot of fun, even if it's not the most complex platformer in the world, so let's talk about it. The setup for Pac-Man World Re-PAC's story is the same as the original game. It's Pac-Man's birthday, and the ghosts show up to ruin it by kidnapping his friends and family members. Pac-Man then gets back home and realizes what's happened, so he travels to Ghost Island to rescue them. It's not exactly the world's deepest narrative, but let's be honest, if you're playing this game, you're here for the platforming and not the emotional storytelling, and that's exactly what the game delivers on. Pac-Man World Re-PAC is a 3D platformer that absolutely feels like a remake of a game made in the late 90s. There are 6 themed worlds to explore, including pirate ship, ruins, and space, and they're complete with a ton of collectibles to gather, enemies to kill, and hazards to avoid within the respective levels. Your goal for each area is simply to reach the end of the level without dying, and if you want to avoid every single enemy and collectible while you do so, you're more than welcome to rush straight to the end of the level. Or you can spend your time trying to rack up a high score by completing and collecting everything you can. Like a lot of platformers from the time, Pac-Man World has a ton of collectibles and power-ups scattered throughout its levels. You'll find Pac Dots, which are new points, metal dots that let you walk underwater, power pellets that let you eat ghosts, fruits that unlock certain areas, PAC-MAN letters that unlock bonus areas, and so much more. Some of these collectibles serve functional purposes, such as unlocking doors leading to secret areas or more points, but otherwise, most of them don't have a real impact on the game or the story beyond trying to get a high score. Additionally, keep an eye out for the various types of switches throughout the levels, as they have different functions based on their colors. For instance, some may just create temporary surfaces for you to walk on to reach extra health if you need it, but others may create necessary platforms for you to reach the end of the level, or grant you access to areas with more collectibles. So pay attention to what each color switch does, as they'll help you complete the game no matter what your goal is. The game is pretty generous with checkpoints, but it can still be pretty tricky depending on how you're playing, and if you do find yourself losing lives on a regular basis, the game will ask you if you'd like to go into easy mode. Sometimes it felt like it was just adding insult to injury when the screen popped up, but it's a nice quality of life option if you're struggling with certain areas and just want to finish the game without giving yourself too much of a headache. I will say that the control scheme might take a little getting used to at first, as I feel a lot of people instinctively hit the square button to attack, or the X button twice to double jump like I did. But hitting X twice is actually the control for Pac-Man's butt bounce, which lets him attack enemies and get a small boost to higher ledges, while square lets Pac-Man hang in the air for some extra time. If the buttons feel weird to you, you do have the option to remap the controls to pretty much whatever you'd like to in the pause menu, but I personally got used to it after the first 2 levels and didn't feel the need to change them after. Platforming is of course the focus of the game, but there are a handful of enemies and world bosses as well, though it's worth noting that none of them are particularly exciting or challenging to face. Most of the time, you'll likely find yourself dying from falling off of cliffs or being hit by hazards like lasers or spikes, as the enemies don't really go out of their way to attack you, and when they do, they're incredibly predictable. As for the bosses, they're fine. They're not very difficult to deal with either, but they're all distinct from each other, and defeating them felt more like taking a victory lap at the end of a world rather than a true challenge that needed to be overcome. For better or worse, Pac-Man World Re-PAC's visuals look exactly like a 1999 game that's gone through a remake after 20 years, and personally, I think it's for the better. The game's look is bright, clear, and colorful, and if you played the original title, you'll notice the graphical improvements for sure. Players who are new to the game might not really notice the improvements, especially since it's about on par with the graphics of other modern platformers, but it doesn't change the fact that significant upgrades have been made, and they're appreciated for sure. If you're familiar with the original Pac-Man arcade games, you're likely going to hear a lot of familiar sounds while playing Pac-Man World Re-PAC, including the classic pellet eating sound and the original Pac-Man motif mixed into the game's soundtrack. The music does a good job complementing each world's themed gameplay, even if they're not particularly memorable tracks, but the sound design is great and really leans into the nostalgia factor while still feeling modern. One thing I would have liked to have seen with the audio though is voice acting. The game only has about 10 or so minutes worth of cutscenes in total, but the original game had voice acting included for characters like Chalkman, the Ghosts, and Pac-Man's family members. And in this remake, the voice acting is replaced with unintelligible gibberish. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but it feels like a weird single step backwards, especially when so many other aspects of the game took giant leaps forward. When it comes to bugs and glitches, those of you who have watched my videos before know I'm pretty adept at running into problems, but while other players have reported the occasional issue with hit detection or audio stuttering, I'm happy to report that I didn't run into a single issue of any kind. Gameplay runs smoothly, and even in the areas with lots of things happening on the screen, I didn't experience any dropped frames or run into any performance issues. Granted, the game's been out for a little over 2 years now, and it's not the world's most complex platformer, but I'm very happy to have not run into any problems. At its core, Pac-Man World Re-PAC is a very late 90s platformer. You've got kidnapped family members, themed worlds, tons of collectibles, and a scoring system that's straight out of an arcade game. While it's not the most exciting game I've ever played, it's a fun and lighthearted platformer with a solid atmosphere. If you played the original Pac-Man World, you'll probably love this, and though the collectibles and high score system give a good amount of replayability, I'm not sure if the game does enough to stand out from other platformers. A lot of modern platformers have more depth and more variety to the gameplay mechanics, and even though this is a remake and not a new game, it still very much feels like a product of its time. That said, the game is both still fun and affordable, and if you have a PlayStation Plus subscription, it's free to download until the end of February 2025, so if you're curious, it's definitely worth checking out. As always though, this is just my opinion. Whether you've just started the search for your kidnapped friends and family, or you're just trying to get the highest score that you can, let me know in the comments what you think of Pac-Man World Re-PAC. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.